There are some models you expect to show up, and there are some that are a complete surprise. When PNSO gave us a slew of theropods, the first deluge being the carcharodontosaurids, there were a few I was sure we would have gotten. One was Concavenator, given how good the remains are. The other was Tyrannotitan, which, as you can see, while not having impressive remains, still has enough to contribute to the reconstruction of other members of the family. Since PNSO transitioned to lipped theropods, I thought that both the carcharodontosaurids and the tyrannosaurids were safely buried, but apparently not so. Along comes this Tyrannotitan in the same aesthetic as its relatives from last year. Tyrannotitan, which means tyrant titan from the Greek tyrannos, meaning tyrant, and titan, referring to one of the powerful pre-Olympian gods, was estimated to have been 12 to 13 meters or 39.4 to 42.7 feet long. At a length of roughly 35 centimeters or 13.8 inches, it's about 1 to 34 for a 12-meter animal, or 1 to 37 for a 13-meter animal. For 1 to 35, it would be an animal that's 12.25 meters or 40.2 feet long. The pose is interesting, seemingly very precariously balanced, kind of like the two-tongued tyrannus, so an animal in a transitional pose between a step. Unsurprisingly, it can't balance independently, which is why it comes with this. Not just one, but actually for some strange reason, two. The paint application, as you can see immediately, is beautiful. Now look at those colors. They blend together very well, and even this rather arresting looking blue-green just transitions so beautifully with the rest of the colors. Even the common browner part, this time in a kind of ochre, functions as a nice highlight. As you can see in the underside, the head, and across the top. There is a psychedelic quality that reminds me of Haolonggu's work. Let's take a closer look. First of all, let's get the elephant out of the way. It's lipless, which is a real surprise since PNSO seems to have pivoted to lipped theropods a while ago. I would speculate that this was done during the same time as the wave of carcharodontosaurids last year, but for some reason hasn't been released until now. The texture, however, cannot be faulted, with all the detail and separation that's so clean and looking like a natural mosaic of reptilian skin. Now just look at this area here, across the maxilla for example, with a bit of red in the brown. The black labial scales, PNSO's trademark, the carefully painted eyes, and even the small area around the eyes have a very nice transition that really just makes the whole thing look very naturalistic indeed. The mandibular texture is just to die for, especially when painted in this smooth transition of colors, including a bias to ochre, which looks really nice, especially when contrasted against the reddish brown in the rest of the skull. And these folds in the throat just look really good. And going down the neck, you start to see an infusion of purples dorsally. Everywhere you see something pleasing to look at. First, you can see this pattern blended so naturally, it looks like subcutaneous pigmentation. With the purplish hue, it calls to mind the memory of Meraxes. Then you have this yellow, a color which is often part of the intransigent palette that PNSO favors, and now actually acting as a highlight and an accent color. I like the irony of that. The shoulder girdle, a favorite area of mine, has the texture you'd expect from PNSO. But especially impressive is look at just how complexly the small arm going into the hands and fingers is painted, down to those claw tips. This is really PNSO back to form, with the kind of complexity that elevates the smallest details. And it's a wonderful relief to see after the simplicity of Zool and the Alamosaurus. Then down here, just wonderful how the purple and ochre, a surprisingly potent combination, really makes the hind limbs stand out. Again, it's surprising that what I normally think of as a base color is now a highlight. And on the posterior aspect of the hind limbs, an area that's hardly looked at and often just along for the ride. And going down here, just look at the form of that musculature and just look at the synthesis of color blends and details. Down the legs, and the feet here. The texturing is just killer. Absolutely exquisite. Just looking at that combination of detail and color in this one area, it's a rendering that's worthy of a museum line quality model. And the claws are as well painted as you see in the hands. Down here is that blue, which you won't be surprised, I really love. It's really wonderful how as you go caudally, this blue that's an accent over here now takes over, alternating in a banding pattern, which I also really like. And as for the bands themselves, it's not just a simple striping of color, but actually has a kind of a surrounding border, almost I want to say variegated look to it. So the whole thing is really complex. And it's such a beautiful piece to have. And as for the comparators, it's really a no-brainer. The other carcharodontosaurids. And it will be obvious that they're very similar, but I thought you'd like to see the differences. If we look at the PNSO Giganotosaurus, Miraxis. Mapusaurus. You can't help but see they're more similar than different. There are, of course, differences in various shapes, curves, angles, and so on. Certainly, they're not indistinguishable, but definitely almost identical. And that's just really the thing. As we look at size differences, understanding again, there's a natural range of sizes for the same animal. Morphologically speaking, there really aren't definitive traits that can be immediately and unequivocally expressed on the outside. I wonder if some costs would have been saved by tweaking a base design, or even with some retooling perhaps, which might explain why Concavenator, which is more distinguishable from the rest, wasn't made. Nevertheless, you can see as a group, it certainly has the most beautifully colored theropods, and in that sense, just blows the tyrannosaurids away. The PNSO Wilson, and the PNSO Cameron left to show you. So that's it really. I think that Tyrannotitan certainly makes the carcharodontosaurids a lot more complete as a clade than I'd ever imagined would be produced. Now certainly, it'd be nice to have a Concavenator, but otherwise, I await with eager anticipation for the next theropod, if only to confirm whether this limblessness is going to return, or simply respecting the previous aesthetic for the carcharodontosaurids. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.